the bank locker rules, which were revised, and you had at least 50% of locker holders having to redo their agreements with their respective banks, according to the Reserve Bank of India's latest directive. But how has that process gone along? Well, not so well. There are discrepancies from one bank to another, and there's also discrepancies between one bank branch to another branch within the same bank. So customers are facing the brunt. Everything from stamp duty to the new agreement being signed is all a stalemate. Karthik Malhotra and Rakeshji continue to be with us. Karthik, talk to us. Again, a very crucial, important thing reminded during the COVID wave, the importance of lockers and putting things in lockers and how safe lockers are. And here you have discrepancies from one bank branch to another.
Absolutely. And what are these discrepancies? Honestly, one bank is okay to provide you with the contract, with the legal stamp paper.
Right.
And the contract printed. All you need to do is sign it and your job is done. Read it and sign it, of course, and your job is done. Whereas another branch of the same bank tells you that, hey, stamp paper is something you've got to go and procure on your own. So why don't you go to a notary, get a stamp paper, come back, we will print out the contract and we sign it. So obviously attracting the ire of the customer. Now add to that confusion. Some banks are saying that a 100 rupee stamp paper will do. Some banks are asking for a 500 rupee stamp paper.
Exactly.
So there is no rationalization, synchronization on what is the real mandate, what is the requirement. Will a 100 rupee stamp paper hold any less authority legally than a 500 rupee stamp paper? So is there some sort of a confusion in the directives of the RBI, or is this some just another way to hassle consumers? We don't really know. Now, let's understand in context why these locker rules and contracts are getting amended. So, the latest contract that got approved by the banking boards and the Indian Banking Association had drafted everything as per whatever the mandate of the RBI was, except that it included a provision where the bank where you hold the locker could be held liable to up to 100 times the annual rent you pay on your locker in case of multiple contingencies, including fire, including building collapse, and a couple of other such exigencies, which were deemed as act of God. Now, the RBI looked at the fine print a little late, I would say, because these agreements were signed till last year. Now, the RBI woke up and it said that, fire and building collapse is not something that the bank would be able to guard against. So, let's exclude these from the penalty due on the bank up to 100 times of your annual monthly locker rate and redraft the agreements. So, everybody who had gone and signed these agreements till Jan this year or till March this year now need to go back to the bank and sign another set of documentations.
Right.
Now, the challenge is for those who don't live in the country, NRIs for example,
Right.
do they need to come back and sign it? It cannot be done digitally. People above a certain age, physical mobility issues, etc., who've done this process again need to go back to the bank and do it. But I think more importantly, we've just revised the agreement last year and we've met whatever target was set out to get these renewed agreements signed. And now RBI wakes up a little late in the day and puts this deadline again on banks and by way of banks back on the customers that we need to complete this exercise by 30th of September this year and a 50% completion by 30th of June, which is today. And if we don't reach that target, we again decide to perhaps extend the deadline of 30th September also. So, we are in the same quagmire of confusion.
Rakesh ji, I want to bring this to you. Karthik has just put this into perspective very well. One was that there was revised rules and then the revised rules got revised again with a new deadline which could get revised again. Phew. Help us explain the rationale of what is going on over here. What was terribly so wrong with bank locker rules that we are in this quagmire now?
Krishna, there is a context. Karthik, I think, briefly alluded to that, but the intent was good. So it all emanated from the highest court. There was a nudge to the RBI where it was, so to say, ordained that there is better protection of the locker from the customer perspective. So, before all this confusion came about, the bank didn't have any liability when it came to the locker. And, so to protect the customer in terms of very, very valuable things that the customer puts in the bank locker, and the bank having no, so to say, liability in terms of protecting it. That's where it all started. But now again, we've been going back and forth on how to ensure that there is some basic minimum guarantee in terms of protecting the locker, that the citizen invests deep faith while putting it in the bank. Generally the sentiment is that we put the best and the most secure thing in our bank lockers and then try and forget about it. So at the macro level, Krishna, I would say that there must be a greater nudge from the RBI to the banks, that there has to be greater responsibility, on the banks, especially in terms of the three categories that Karthik identified: natural calamities, fire, and stuff. Ultimately, if there's a fire in my house, I have to be held responsible. Similarly, if the bank is putting, has to be the custodian of the most valuable stuff that a citizen or a customer, invests in the bank. It is important that the bank also becomes equally responsible. So that's part one. Part B is, again, good intent to my mind, starting from the highest court's nudge, but bad execution, as we have seen repeatedly. There is no standardization, and which is creating a lot of confusion. SBI is investing in terms of, the stamp paper, and the paperwork. The customer doesn't have to spend any extra money, but other banks are a little confused about that, which is adding to the entire challenge. So broadly, I think RBI needs to revisit it quickly, create a simple SOP. I mean, there's an FAQ, and circulate it to all banks and say that the bank must put this money upfront because they're charging a decent amount of money for the rentals. So the bank must, like SBI has done as the lead state owned bank, must not put the encumbrance of investing and putting that money of stamp paper and the paperwork on the customer. That will ease the stress a bit. And second, the customers also, possibly there should be probably an online way of doing it, which is not the case to my mind. I don't know, Karthik can correct me right now.
It's not, so you're
And
right. There
yeah,
isn't any provision to do it.
yeah.
In
If we
fact,
are
you have to
doing
visit
digital
your
India,
locker branch. You can't even do it in any other bank branch. You have to visit the
yeah,
branch
yeah.
where your locker is physically housed.
Absolutely. And then denomination of the stamp paper also is varying between bank to bank.
Absolutely,
So
100 rupees, 500 rupees. Let's
yeah,
have the rule
I
crystal
think
clear and
I
make the
believe
life of the
500.
consumer. At the end of the day, I think the life of the consumer has to be made
Yeah,
simpler, and that is where the whole convenience of banking needs to
absolutely.
shine out. That you
Yeah.
have the contracts ready, printed, write the name or type out the name, get the signature, and the job is done. So, but Rakesh, I wanted to actually good morning to you. Sorry, didn't get a chance to
Morning,
greet you
morning,
early
Karthik.
this
Yeah,
morning.
that's right.
But I just wanted to understand, even this penalty that RBI has imposed on banks through the way of this contract is only 100 times the annual rental of the locker. Now, on an average, a small locker from, let's say, SBI can be taken at about 2,000 rupees per annum, and maybe about 4,000
2,500, I
rupees for
guess.
a, sorry?
2,500, I think, is the start price.
2,500 or so. 100 times that is 2,50,000 rupees. I'm pretty sure for an average Indian, especially a married Indian, which is when I think opening of lockers becomes prevalent, the value of gold stored in those lockers at today's going rate is likely to be much higher than 2 lakh rupees or 2,50,000 rupees. And in addition to that, why do you keep money in a locker? You keep money in the locker so that you have somebody else to worry about incidents of fire, theft, building collapse, etc. Now, if banks don't take that responsibility and offer you only 100 times the annual rent, which sounds great as a headline number, but when you do the calculation, it's actually not a very large number. For somebody who's deposited 10 lakh, 15 lakh, 20 lakh rupees worth of gold or other valuables in that locker, 100x is nothing.
No, I absolutely. I think you flagged the most important issue. I'll come to the citizen responsibility also a little later. But first and foremost, bank has to take complete. If it is pitching it as prime real estate, how it cannot be responsible for safeguarding its physical well-being and then monetary, compensation when it comes to a problem that arises on account of, either man-made or a calamity kind of a situation. It has to this number of 100 times the rent is. I mean, it's actually a joke. And if you look at the banking system, we're pushing fixed deposits as truly on the ground, India still invests deeply in fixed deposits. And your locker, has all the copies of those fixed deposits, and also has the originals of your home papers. I mean, I have my original home papers, and I keep worrying, someday something happens to that locker, the bank is not responsible. Not only is my, gold, as you mentioned, which is a key category when it comes to what is inside the locker at most of the banks in India, your own original house papers are there. So you're left with nothing. There is no mitigation, and it is an important issue to flag, and we must build a sustained campaign to try and increase the quotient of banks' responsibility, both in terms of the well-being of the locker and, unfortunately, in case of any problem, a much greater compensation due to the customer. If you look at the fixed deposits themselves, Karthik, you would imagine only recently, even if you have a 1 crore FD in a bank or 5 crore FD in a bank,
Yeah.
50 crore, the best that you can get is 5 lakh
5
rupees.
lakh rupees, true. And compare this to the US, sir. In the US, every citizen can get as much as 5 lakh US dollars. $500,000 US dollars is the insurance that the FDIC offers in the US. Compare that to India, 5 lakh rupees, no matter what. And not just fixed deposits, even the saving accounts, other investments that you have at that particular bank is insured to the extent of only 5 lakh rupees. I think it's high time, I couldn't agree more with you, it's high time that the bankers take some responsibility for the money that citizens park with them.
Absolutely. I mean, look at the amount of money that we have in FDs. Even when the markets are rolling, we have a bull run. The inflow into FDs has never stopped. It's never ebbed, even at falling interest rates, because people believe, especially senior citizens and women, they invest in tremendous faith in the bank. And what does the bank do with that? You have X number. You spent all your lifetime into and converted that into FDs, and the best you get is a 5 lakh rupees. And this needs complete re-examination. I would again go back to my favorite peeve, that is, this particular government and governments in the past have repeatedly, so to say, bypassed, ignored, to our peril, the Indian middle class. They don't see it as very, very important, because probably we're not that important as a vote bank constituency. We have to blame ourselves, because partly in the Sobos and the Delhi, South Delhi areas, we don't vote, and so though that percentage has increased over the last few years, but there is a grudge politicians hold against us, saying that middle class said they'll manage themselves. But
we are the easiest to target, sir. We are the easiest to target, because where else do we go? Neither are we the vote bank. We are the highest tax-paying citizens as a percentage of the population, and extremely busy in making ends meet. So we are the easiest targets. Do anything, mess around with our lives. We won't have the time to fight.
Sir, there's a term for us in Tamil. It's called Surnilai Kaidi, which means a Kaidi of the situation. That's what the middle class is in India. So we don't have, governments will come and go. Every government will come and talk about, we are with the poor. Which government in history has come out and said that we're not with the poor? Every government is with the poor. So who is not who is the government not with the middle class?
I'm tempted to quote our Prime Minister, who is deeply invested in the bottom of the pyramid, and also did corporate tax cuts. I'm reading both as significant, milestones for middle class being completely left out. He did say in one of the speeches, I don't remember, it was 15th August, one of the editions that he did the address, that I do believe that the Indian middle class has this responsibility to do heavy lifting for the poor. I mean, nice, noble political sentiment, and we are doing that.
A very socialist statement, sir. I would say it doesn't speak of right-wing values.
As a middle-class person, I would be like, tax the rich. That's a great way of taking care of the poor. Tax the rich more. Tax the corporates more. Tax the top of the pyramid more. And the people stuck in the middle of the pyramid.
And we're talking about a situation where the maximum tax outgo, including cess, etc., for the ultra-rich has fallen from 42% to 37% in the last budget alone.
Yeah, I mean, and then look at the agriculture taxation, which is nil, and corporate taxation has been cut. So in that sense, I'm all for corporate tax cut. I don't want to do it either or situation. I'm all for the bottom of the pyramid in this entire social welfare template that is done, because ultimately we do have a responsibility as citizens and of this country to see that the poverty levels keep decreasing, and we are able to pull more and more people from the bottom of the pyramid to lower middle class level. But not at the cost of the middle class. And, especially middle class also I'm identifying as the professional working class. Because, the salary comes and tax is deducted. You have no control on it. I mean, you cannot run away.
Right.
You have to take it as God's, wish and will.
Right. As I said, the term for that in Tamil is situational kaidi. A kaidi who is a kaidi of the situation. You have no choice. The moment you decide to earn, that's the moment you decide to pay tax. You don't realize it at that stage. When you go out there to get a job, all that means is that you will be under the tax net. No, you will be under the tax net for the rest of your life. That's what
But
it
just
means.
And
one little
direct, indirect
perspective.
taxes combined, 6 months of
Yeah.
the year we work for the government or we work for others apart from us. The tax
Well,
that we pay, direct and
And
indirect
and
combined, is about
and
six
Karthik,
months.
in the process we get othered.
True. True.
yeah.
So,
True.
but one little perspective on the citizen responsibility when it comes back to our core topic of the day is
Fair enough.
lockers. So there is a, I don't have the data right now, but I wish we could pull it up. A massive number of rentals not being paid and people not releasing the locker. See, ultimately, the macro sentiment to go for a locker is that you feel that it's a safety belt, right? You're wrongly, as we discussed at length. But it's much more safer than having it at home. And by and large, the track record of safety, even with no responsibility at banks, is very high. So in that sense, lot of lockers at various levels of the length and the capacity are blocked by citizens who don't pay rent, don't turn up, and don't vacate their stuff from the lockers. And the second responsibility piece in terms of the citizen role is that there are certain caveats what you can put in a locker. That also is being violated grossly.
Of
We have
course,
seen
people
that.
stash cash in their lockers. True.
No, cash and stuff that it should not be there.
Yeah.
And whenever it's cash, there is this bigger charge from the bank that it possibly could be black money.
True.
But here is a conundrum. The bank employee cannot, even have a peep into what is inside. He's not supposed to know what is inside. He opens. There are two keys. He opens one key, and then you can open with your key the locker, and then whatever you put inside. So great responsibility on the citizens as well. I would say, Karthik and Krishna, that they use it for the purpose it's intended to. To my mind, safety of your very very important documents, which could be your birth certificate, which could be your educational qualification, which could be your house papers, though the digital locker does have the capability to put up your educational certificates and your Aadhars of the world, and we've done that, we've seen that. But house papers, ownership papers are very very important. Will, a lot of people have put their wills and documentation when it comes to distributing the property among their heirs, legal ones, is in the lockers. So it works both ways. I would imagine that citizens who are educated have these lockers, must be a little more responsive. But banks and RBI in particular, I think, has to play a greater role in completely re-examining, and that too very urgently, this entire piece about securing the middle class interest when it comes to lockers and the deposits they have with the banks at large.